Good evening and welcome to this meeting of South Oxfordshire District Council's Planning Committee. I am Councillor James Norman and I'm speaking for Councillor David Bretherton, who will be chairing this meeting. May I remind everyone that this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. Only members of the public who have registered to speak are allowed to do so, and I will call on them to speak during the appropriate agenda item. This meeting is being held at our offices in Abbey House, Abingdon. Committee members are here in person, but officers and speakers are able to join remotely. The meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. This system allows councillors who are unable to attend in person to contribute to the meeting, but only councillors who are present in the room are allowed to vote. Procedural matters. For speakers and members of the public who have joined remotely, please ensure that your microphone is muted and that your camera is off, even in chin-up, for the duration of the meeting until you are called to speak. The Planning Committee is a decision-making committee of the Council, and it is important that a set procedure is followed. All committee members have received a full report on each planning application, either on paper or electronically, and it should be noted that committee members and officers may be using electronic devices for reference throughout the meeting. For each application, we will first hear from the planning officer, followed by the parish or town council, and then objectors, supporters and local members. Each group will have 5 minutes to speak to the committee, after which members may ask questions of the speaker. The committee may then ask questions of clarification of the planning officer. The committee will then debate and vote on the application. Councillors wishing to ask a question or participate in the debate are asked to indicate this by alerting myself or officers by raising a hand. Voting will be by a show of hands. Members, please raise your hand clearly and keep it raised to allow a count to take place. If it is unclear how members are voting through a show of hands, I will ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of those present and how they are voting. Housekeeping announcements. In the event of emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to the right of this meeting room, and go to assembly point 9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. The Democratic Services Officer present will assist you. Can everyone please ensure that their mobile phone is switched to silent or switched off during the meeting? Members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after their application has been heard are welcome to do so via the front door in reception. When the meeting is finished, I will ask for confirmation that the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. Now the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Let me do that. So that's item 1 on the agenda. Item 2 is apologies for absence.
Thank you. We've had apologies from Councillor Ramsdale and Councillor Wall.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the previous meeting to adopt and sign as a correct record of the planning committee minutes of the meeting held on 30th of July. Is that agreed? Thank you. Declaration of interest, should ask Councillor Norman says, to receive declarations of disposable pecuniary interest, other registered interest, or non-registered interest, or any conflicts of interest in respect of items on the agenda for the meeting. I see none. Thank you. Urgent business, to receive notification of any urgent business.
No urgent.
We've got no urgent business. We move on then to the agenda items. On to item 7, which is the planning committee. Sorry, the planning application P25 S0350, land for rear Pennyhill Woodlands Road, Oxfordshire. And the planning officer here is Ben. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Good evening. I'll be discussing land to the rear at Pennyhill Woodlands Road, Hertford. And this is a full application for a development of 16 homes, including 40% affordable housing, which goes to 6 affordable units. The application has come full committee due to call and requests from Councillor Arlett and Councillor Woolings, as well as objections from Hertford Parish Council, Enmond Town Council and Shipwreck Parish Council. So the site is located on the edge of Lower Shiplake, though it falls within parish of Harpston, and the site location plan shown on the screen provides the boundary of the site in red line, with the blue line boundary showing land within the applicant's control, which is the neighbouring land farm Crossways development. moving to the aerial review of the site, which shows the site's context in respect to its relationship to Lower Shiplake. The site will be accessed from the A4155 through the adjacent housing development known as Crossways, and the Crossways development is substantially complete now and was built by the applicant for these proposals. On the northern boundary of the site, planning permission has been granted for 95 homes, which is now reduced to 84 homes on the site, known as Thames Farm. There. So the key consideration of determining whether the principle of development is acceptable is whether the site constitutes infill development. As discussed in the officer report to this committee, whilst the site lies within the parish of Parkton and is covered by the Joint Henley and Hertfordshire neighbourhood plan, it forms part of the settlement of Lower Shiplake. Lower Shiplake is classified as a smaller village in the settlement hierarchy of the local plan, with policy H16 by the support for infill development in smaller villages. Infill development is defined as the filling of a small gap in an otherwise continuous built-up frontage or on other sites within the settlements where the site is closely surrounded by building. Policy H4 in the Joint Henley and Hertfordshire neighbourhood plan provides support for infill development within the built-up areas of Henley and Hertfordshire. The policy though does not address the settlement of Lower Shiplake, as it is largely outside the neighbourhood plan boundary. As the map on the screen shows, the site is bounded by residential development to the south, with low density development along Woodlands Road. To the east lies the recently constructed on Crossways development, and there's also a larger development of 84 homes related on the site known as Thames Farm to the north. There's also been development further north along the A155 with the former wine mill garden centre beyond homes. The application for the adjacent Crossways development was determined on appeal, with the inspector finding that the Crossways site was part of the village of Lower Shiplake, and due to the recently approved development along the A4155, I don't see any reasons to depart from this view. Given this, as well as the fact that development would be closely surrounded by residential development, I've considered the proposal to represent infill development in a similar village in accordance with policy H16 of the local plan and are so acceptable in principle. Whilst I've concluded that the principle of development is acceptable, further consideration is the council's 5-year housing land supply position. The council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. So paragraph 11 of the NPPF directs the decision maker to grant permission for residential developments unless there are strong reasons for refusal due to the impact of proposals that have and its particular importance and whether the adverse impact will demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So in respect to the design of the site plan here shown here provides the layout of the development, and in terms of appearance, it would be very similar to the neighbouring Crossways development. Doing this was the same applicant in detail, so to demonstrate this. So the next slide shows pictures of the essentially complete Crossways development. There are no remaining technical objections on the proposals, though a key issue considered as part of the application and noted in a number of public representations were the ground conditions of the site. I'm aware that the committee has recently considered similar issues on the neighbouring Thames Farm site. Following further information and advised plans provided by the applicant, both the Environment Agency and the Council Drainage Officer are content that the development be delivered, subject to conditions. A bit more detail. The developers proposed a raft foundation design, which is the same as that on the neighbouring Crossways development, with the sustainable drainage system designed to minimise any potential impacts on water quality of the aquifer that sits beneath the site. The proposals will also deliver off-site infrastructure improvements, shown here, with delivery of a parking crossing on the A4155. This will provide safer access to the services and facilities of the four inclusive Lower Shiplake. So it is your office's recommendation that the application is approved subject to the submission of a district level licensing scheme. of licensing reports confirm that the district level licensing scheme for grade question use can be entered into. This is not being provided today due to the cost of obtaining this. However, I am confident that there will not be an issue to obtain. In addition, the estimates of delivery agreement will need to be finalised to secure the necessary contributions to infrastructure and affordable housing. And the recommendation in the officer report should also be updated to explicitly include the county council infrastructure requirements as they are set out in paragraph 7.4 of the report. And also, just in addition, to note that the second sentence of paragraph 7.1, that's the infrastructure conditions, has been included in error and is not relevant. In addition, any permission granted should be subject to the conditions set out in the permits line. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Okay, I've got one speaker on this one, which is Tom Rumble, and Luke Bond, the agent. Thank you. Okay, you have 5 minutes for a moment, you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. As you've heard, this application proposes the construction of 16 dwellings with policy-compliant affordable housing. It is a wholly policy-compliant application that comes to you tonight with a recommendation for approval. The applicant, Westbourne Homes, are committed to delivering a high-quality development on this logical development site, immediately adjacent to one they have successfully completed. The proposal is a detailed application whereby the Section 106 is agreed and the applicant will be seeking to commence development promptly. We have worked proactively with your officer to progress a comprehensive application over the course of the past 18 months. This has resulted in no objections from the Council's drainage, tree, air quality, contaminated land, environmental protection, housing, landscape, highway, or drainage officers. Further, no objection is forthcoming from the EA or the urban design officer. The proposal offers many benefits. 1, it provides 16 dwellings at a time of acknowledged significant housing shortfall. 2, it offers a genuine mix of dwelling sizes, but is guided towards family-sized accommodation most needed in this locality. 3, it offers a fully policy-compliant affordable housing provision with 6 affordable homes provided on site alongside the required financial contribution. 4, it secures a high-quality designed residential environment at a medium to low density. 5, a package of B&G measures has been agreed. 6, a package of off-site highway improvements, including an upgraded pedestrian crossing on Reading Road, creating an improved crossing point for residents accessing the village centre. This is alongside a further £21,000 contribution towards wider public transport infrastructure. 7, this offers a scheme that can be delivered in the short term in a detailed application form by a local award-winning SME developer. Further, the scheme exceeds all DM guidance in relation to impacts upon neighbours and is appropriate in scale, mass, height, garden size and parking provision respects. In relation to ground conditions, detailed drainage, geotechnical and geo-environmental assessments, including a raft foundation feasibility study, conclude that raft foundations are suitable with no requirement for piling or ground grouting. This is supported by extensive ground investigations undertaken across both the site and the adjacent Crossways development, including 148 home penetration tests, which identified no adverse ground conditions and confirmed the suitability of raft foundations on this site. The same approach has been successfully implemented at the adjacent Crossways development, which is now completed, signed off and fully occupied with no ground stability or drainage issues. Accordingly, there are no objections from the relevant council officers or the EA. Geographically, the site forms logical infill development bound by the commenced Thames Farm site to the north, existing residential properties fronting Woodlands Road to the south, and the completed Crossways development immediately to the east. The western extent of the proposal would also fall comfortably inside the western built form line defined by Thames Farm to the north, and you've seen that on the plan displayed by your officer. Importantly, this part of Ship Lake has previously been recognised as forming part of the settlement and as a sustainable location for residential development through appeal decisions. The site therefore forms a wholly logical one for development, consistent with policy H16. In summary, your officer has concluded that the scheme is compliant with all policies within the development plan. It therefore accords with the development plan, without even needing to consider the implications of the tilted balance. The proposal is brought forward by Westbourne Homes, who form a local development company committed to delivering high quality development immediately adjacent to one that won a Best Residential Development at last year's International Property Awards. Rightly, the scheme is recommended for approval. Thank you for your time.
Richie, any questions? Councillor Roberts?
Yes, Mr. Brundle. Can you remind me on the first site that was carried out, how many houses were built on that site?
On the Crossways development to the east, 11.
How many affordable were there?
4.
Okay, I see no further questions. No further questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next one will be the ward councillor. I did have an email from Lee Rawlins reporting in saying he looked at it very carefully and he was supporting the application. Yeah. If anybody else saw that one, but typically Lee is about 3 pages. Okay, so it's going back to questions to the officer. So to Ben, anything? Any questions for the officer? Can't stop him.
I read through the report carefully and made a list of the reports that seem to be missing, including an ecological report on great crested newts, one on bats, one on birds, contaminated land, possible arsenic, and the risk to groundwater, which presumably is similar to the site to the north. Are you reasonably confident that these will be produced and that this application has a chance of actually being delivered?
Yes. So in terms of great crested newts, I think I've addressed that in the recommendation.
Yeah.
That there needs to be a call from nature space, so we can ensure it's additional licensing scheme. That was what has been important. They would purchase that report.
It's just quite unusual to have this many reports outstanding at the point that we are being asked to approve or otherwise this application. There seems to be rather a lot outstanding on this particular application.
I think quite often, a lot of these reports are secured by condition.
Right,
And that's quite often.
and that's how you would do it in this instance, that these will be conditions of an approval if it were to be given.
In terms of the great crested newt, that would be to receive before decisions on it.
Right.
So that's the recommendation. That report wasn't forthcoming. The recommendation is that the application is used.
And the same with bats and birds and that.
The bats, I think I'm just checking the wording of the ecology conditions.
So you talk about
Lighting and lighting, there's also another temperature, look, how condition 7 and pain. Right, the appendix, but it's protecting priority species for efficiency.
yeah, yeah. And I'd like to see some of his land is covered in condition 18.
Right. I mean, where I sat in on the committee where Thames Farm development was considered, and in that instance, the committee recommended refusal, but it was given permission as an appeal. Are you
confident that that is the right outcome and that again, the site can be delivered without damage to the aquifer.
I'm confident with the conditions that are also applied in the Environment Agency advised that it could be good without damage to the aquifer.
Yeah.
Aquifer. I think also the foundations, which we discussed, I think they would be different on this site in terms of rock.
You're going to use rock, not
Yeah, which has been delivered on the adjacents.
Yeah.
So I think it does give you good confidence that it can be totally very simple solution.
Councillor Sutherland.
So my question, first of all, is this site genuinely infill or is it backland? And secondly, it seems to sit outside the settlement boundary. Is that correct? Or is I reading that correctly?
I'll take the settlement boundary issue first. So the site is in the parish of Harpsden and is covered by the John Henry and Harpsden neighbourhood plan. There is no settlement boundary for that area in that neighbourhood plan. There is the adjacent parish of Lavish Shiplead, does have a settlement boundary within it, but whilst it's material consideration, the application is not being considered against that as part of the development plan. As at the time when they were making that was part of the Joint Henry and Harpsden neighbourhood plan, I don't think it could be included. They'd have to change the plan boundaries and things like that. So for me, the Joint Henry and Harpsden neighbourhood plan is not anything like that as part of the development plan. It is silently built up area of Lower Ship Lake. We've got an appeal decision on the neighbouring site, which has said that is
Crossways or Tom's?
sorry, the neighbouring site. Sorry, yeah. That is said that it's part of the village of Lower Ship Lake, and I don't see a reason to depart from that at this point. And the inspector did say on that site, yes, it was in full and set out the reasons because of the Thames Farm development on Williams Road for it, and it wasn't extending beyond essentially the settlement value that Thames Farm developed.
So if Thames Farm wasn't there, that would be backland development, but because Thames Farm is proposed, that's no way built.
Yes, as it's closely surrounded by buildings on most of the sites.
Okay.
Councillor Dragon.
Obviously, we have to do developments in accordance with our policy, and here we're saying this application was being approved because it's an infill, and it's towards the depth of the part of the infill, which is on other sites within settlements, but the site is closely surrounded by buildings. Is it not? Okay. I've just been looking at. I was trying to explore what these words mean. We say closely surrounded by a building. Now, when I'm looking at these plans, we've only got. We're not. It strikes me this site is not closely surrounded by buildings. We also agree. I would agree, and I'm sure you'll say that the buildings to the right across from this are buildings, but to the north, there are no buildings because it's a development site. So it's hypothetical buildings. They're not actually buildings. It's going to be, the developer at that land may go past buildings, may never be built, and so not. I can't say that site is closely surrounded by buildings to the north. Furthermore, looking at the application, that site to the left of the, if I put it like that, to the west, it's open green space, and to the south, there's a tennis court, and I think so neither of those strikes me as being buildings within the meaning of the act. My reading. I mean, a building is a tennis court is not a building. I think we would agree. And on that green space to the left, it's not a building. And the area of the
This is
north.
a question, Councillor.
It is. Can you really justify that this is an infill development on a site that's closely surrounded by buildings?
I think yes. One, we've had an appeal decision before, which has justified that. So the appeal inspector on the lands that were proposed development found that conclusion, came to that conclusion, and that's the conclusion I've taken from. I think There is built development to the south of the site. There is built development to the east of the site, and
Build development, but not buildings. And what's the wording here is buildings.
but how close you?
I
I get that's a judgment, but I think taken from previous evidence, I think I have to be led to the conclusion that there is built development as it surrounds the site.
perhaps what we'll advise our policy to say build development rather than buildings. Anyway, there we are. Perhaps you disagree on that, but there we are. That's my question.
I'll be a question. Okay. Right. Any further questions? That's all.
I guess following up on the last two questions, because I want to really understand the kind of logic sequence to be absolutely clear and make sure I've understood it properly. So Henley and Hartston has a neighbourhood plan, and this has to be dictated by Henley and Hartston, although it's physically in their shipload because it's in Henley, it's in Hartston parish. Is that correct?
So the development plan is formed of the John Henry and Harton neighbourhood plan, Oxfordshire local plan, and then other documents and so on.
Does the Henley and the Henley and Hartston plan did not have a settlement boundary?
No,
Within it?
policy H4 is the key policy there, but that relates to built up areas of Henley and Hartston and doesn't reference to the ship lake.
And does that neighbourhood plan have a policy on infill?
Yes, policy H4.
Okay. And does that allows for infill?
Infill development in the built up areas of Henley and Hartston, but it doesn't reference Lower Ship Lake. And therefore rely mainly on policy page 16 in the local plan.
I see. So it basically the neighbourhood plan is not brought forward. It's not relevant to this.
It's solely into a position.
So it defaults to the local plan. So page 16 and the local plan says that where it is infill and Councillor Dragonetti was questioning whether this is really infill, that would apply. If this is genuinely infill, then on page 16 we're applying. So we're not overruling a neighbourhood plan.
Not in my view.
As such. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Arlott, you have a question?
Yes, Chairman. We've got down here on page 38, section 106 agreements, looks like half a dozen of them, which one would imagine they are always complete before any development start. We've also got 21 conditions, which I think covers a lot of what's the questions that have been raised. Who checks to see all these 21 conditions are complete on a development?
The majority of them, I think possibly all of them, they would need to make an application to the district council to discharge those conditions. And in particular, for conditions where they relate to frequent, they can't discharge them, they can't start building until they've been discharged. It's an application before they can start building.
So the whole 21 conditions,
They will
checked by you.
they will be checked by Anderson.
So who checks to see that all 21 are done then?
The case officer does.
Which is Ben.
Yeah, it won't be in this case because Ben's gone back to policy, but we'll have another officer looking at it. Might be me.
The question.
I should follow this up with you then.
James, you have a question?
Yes. Did you state that the Thames Farm development has commenced?
It's got a legal commencement to Thames Farm and has gone to sort of recent applications that have been
Legal commencement.
so they I think they've implemented the access.
Okay. And that qualifies as
So that commission raised that stand.
but no buildings have been constructed yet.
As far as I'm aware.
Thank you.
Just one comment, Chairman. It's again,
It's a question.
well, I think you'll take this one. It's a bit disappointing that we don't have anybody from Hartston here to speak against their recommendation for wheelchair rights.
But
They didn't set up no favours at all with parishes, in my view.
there's no one, so we can't actually question.
Well, that was a question for you then.
Right, okay, we finished with questions to the officer. We can sit down and sort of find some more questions. And I'm looking for a proposal.
That's the topic I'll be supporting, then Duncan's recommendation was approved. I don't see that there are sufficient reasons why we can object to this. I think if we did and went to appeal, we'd lose. It seems to be a logical next step to the first phase of the scheme on the front land. And I think that this would be a good appropriate development in this village. And I can't see why we should try and stop this. So I think we should be voting for it.
Okay, thank you. Is that seconded?
No, that's it.
You're seconded. Thank you, Councillor. I'll let you street now.
No, I've got nothing to observe.
Chairman, I'll have the debate then.
Other than all the conditions seem to cover any questions that have been raised.
I'll open debate. Is there any debate? Anybody who wishes to speak? Councillor Dragon.
Yeah, well, I'm going to build up on my point, which is that we should be considering applications to be in line with policy. And the policy is clearly stated, the policy defines infill development as sites within settlements where the site is closely surrounded by building. And here we know, we learn that we've only got buildings on a building on one side, which is the crossways thing. To the north, it's a building, a potential building site. So it's not a building at all. It's a speculative development site. So that does not accord with the policy. So the policy and the officers, and further out in this report, we refer to the built development as where the policy actually doesn't say built development. The policy says building. And either we work on these words that are set out there, which should be all being carefully argued in front of a planning inspector, sorry, the inspector for our local plan, and those words are there. The words of an infill development are not it's a building and not speculative building sites or potential building sites. And otherwise, we've got the whole of South Oxfordshire is potential infill site because everyone wants to build it everywhere all over the place. So we've got a speculative site on one side, or open green space, and to the left, like that, and to the south, there's a tennis court. Now, a tennis court is not a building, so I'm going to oppose its application.
Thank you to still up. Councillor Sutton.
Yeah, so very much what Councillor Dragonetti said, but also, yeah, I mean it's outside settlement boundary. I don't really believe it was infill site. I don't see it as infill site. I see it as backland development, and essentially, Thames Farm. It looks like there's a lot of drainage issues outstanding. We're going to have problems there, and I think this is just going to add to it. So I'm not really supporting this.
What's anybody else who can speak? I do tend to agree with Councillor Dragonetti that the words in the policy are not clear.
But they are clear.
They are clear, but they're open to interpretation, and that's the issue. The issue is they're open to interpretation. And in my experience, that's been the case for the past 10 years. I hope in the next policy they are a bit tighter, but maybe they're deliberately loose so that you can actually look at each case, each application on its merits and determine whether you think it is or not. I'm going to be corrected. Basically, I'm going to go back to Ben because Crossways was that on appeal and determined to be infill.
Yes.
The Crossways was determined to be infill on appeal. So that actually tells you where we would go with this land if it went up here. Okay. Councillor, sorry, you want to
yes. One question then. How long ago was the appeal at Crossway? I'm sorry, can I just clarification to do with
what I've just said? Okay.
Well, to do with the letter of the law on this. I actually make so first of all, what stage was Thames Farm at when that appeal was made? Did the inspector consider that Thames Farm was a built environment, even though it hadn't commenced at that stage? Or was that was relevant to the appeal that Thames Farm had got planning permission, presumably at the time?
Yeah, the appeal was determined in September 2022. So Thames Farm had planning permission at that point.
In September 22?
Thames Farm.
Clarify, Thames Farm got permission in 2016, but there's been, as you know, a huge saga in Thames Farm.
Issues already.
And it got reserved matters in 2019. But then the drainage couldn't be implemented. So a new application came in for the drainage, full application for the drainage scheme, plus the discharge of condition. And alongside that, a new application, section 73 application, which amends the original outline of the self-guidance tender. Now, you know, those of you who are at committee will know that that was recommended for approval, members refused it, it went to appeal, and all those three applications have been allowed. And they were allowed.
I think that explains the timescale.
Yeah, so they were allowed after 22 when Crossways was allowed an appeal, but the inspector even in 22 said that Thames Farm had a lawful commencement, so it was a lawful commenced site. So if you've got a lawful commenced site, you can assume that development will happen.
Okay, so although Councillor Dragonetti's point is that the policy actually says buildings, in fact, inspectors have regarded a site with planning permission as effectively a built environment. Would that be true?
Yes, in this case, because it had commenced, but latterly it's had an amendment, and it's considered to be deliverable, even more deliverable because the drainage has been over.
Okay, and still on the information, so.
Chair, there's a point of order. We've had questions of the opposite.
I know this.
Will we doing it again?
Yeah, this is a new point. We're needing clarification.
This is another legal point. Is the fact that the building to the south, Councillor Dragonetti says this is a tennis court. If it is the curtilage of a dwelling, does that constitute a built environment from the point of view of infill development? Presumably there is a dwelling as well as a tennis court. And the answer is it if it's the curtilage of a dwelling that constitutes building?
Yes, so
no, it is central to the debate.
It is central to the debate. I'm grateful to clarify the date line on Thames Farm because that's I think was confusing as well. Because we know we debated Thames Farm last year, although we got permission initially in 2016. So that's a long time before everything on the timeline, which is confusing. Okay, right. Councillor Arlett. I've spoken. No, you seconded the motion. You're not spoken. You're not spoken. Okay, so we're going back to Councillor Topping to sum up, Councillor.
Yeah, I understand what you just trying to say, but in my understanding of planning is that it doesn't matter whether the buildings are physically there or not. They have had planning permission for a considerable period of time, confirmed by the recent section 73 and implemented. And as far as the planning inspector are concerned, those buildings can exist and will exist. And therefore this site is surrounded on three sides by built development, and therefore it's infill. And if we refuse this, we will lose an appeal. And for that reason, I'm supporting the recommendation to approve.
Okay, so I've got a proposal. This is recommendation. Placed and seconded. All those in favour of the motion, please show. One, two, three, 5 against. 3, so that is carried. Sorry, Paul, with your screen there is blocking my view. I'm going to ask you to I cannot see a committee members.
I'm going to move down.
But from where we are, Chairman, we can see a fan, and I've got someone's head.
I don't think it's to do that. Yes. 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 Be very quiet. Oh. It's only got dark in 10 minutes. Yeah. Right, so we'll move on. The planning application P25 S3304, land at rear 8789 Rolling Hill Way, Chinner. I think we're all probably familiar with. And I have two speakers on this one. First one is Councillor Jackie Webb from Chair of Parish Council. I know she was there earlier. Oh, sorry. We haven't done the officers' reports. Sorry, Jackie. I'm trying to get ahead of us. Sorry. We haven't done the officers' report. So that's Paul. That's where you replace it. So you're here.
That's on there, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 9 detached dwellings. It's a material planning consideration that there is an extant permission in principle on this site for the erection of 8 to 9 dwellings. Principle of development remains acceptable. Your officers consider that the proposed development would not result in any material harm to the character and appearance of this part of Chinner, as set out in paragraph 7.6 and 7.11 of the report. Your officers consider that the interrelationship between the proposed dwellings and their immediate neighbours would be acceptable in respect of light, outlook and privacy, as noted in paragraph 7.12, 7.18 of the report. In the expert opinion of the local highway authorities, the proposed access and parking arrangements did not give rise to conditions prejudicial to highway safety, highway and pedestrian safety, in compliance with local plan policy trans 5, as explained in paragraph 7.19. Paragraph 7.20 of the report notes that the waste management team are satisfied with the layout from a waste collection perspective. Your officers consider that the proposed market housing mix would provide a sufficient range of dwelling types to be in general conformity with policy H11, as shown in paragraph 7.22 of the report. Matters related to drainage have been dealt with to the satisfaction of the council's flood risk and drainage engineer, as discussed in paragraph 7.23 and 7.4 of the report. Council's ecology officer has commented that protected species and biodiversity net gain could be addressed through the recommended planning conditions, as set out in paragraph 7.25 to 7.27 of the report. Your officers have explained that paragraph 7.28 to 7.30 of the report why the application did not trigger a requirement for affordable housing. Paragraph 7.31 of the report highlights that the proposed dwellings would meet sustainable design criteria. Your officers consider that the application would comply with the relevant development plan policies, and on that basis, it is recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to the planning conditions listed in the report.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, I'll go to speakers. Councillor Webb.
Hello.
Hello again. Yeah, we can all walk on you, and you have your 5 minutes started from when you start speaking.
Thank you. I speak on behalf of Chinner Parish Council, which respectfully asks the committee to refuse this application. The Parish Council recognises the officer's recommendation for approval and that the site lies within the Chinner settlement boundary, but this does not automatically make every scale, density or form of development acceptable. Our concern is that the proposal should not be considered simply as 9 houses on a site within the settlement boundary. The committee is asked to consider whether this particular detailed development in this location and in conjunction with the adjoining development complies with the development plan and in particular the made Chinner neighbourhood plan. We recognise that permission in principle has previously been granted for 8 to 9 dwellings. However, this is a full planning application. Permission in principle did not determine the detailed layout, design, access, drainage or relationship with neighbouring developments. Those matters remain for this committee to determine. The relationship with the adjoining development is the Parish Council's principal concern. The application proposes 9 dwellings which are physically and functionally connected to the adjoining development associated with number 81 Lower Icknield Way, comprising a further 10 dwellings, making 19 dwellings in total. We recognise that there are separate applications, landowners and developers. We are not suggesting that they should simply be treated as one application. Our concern is that the cumulative effects of the 2 developments should not be overlooked. Importantly, the officer's report itself acknowledges that the access arrangement proposed for this application is not reflected on the approved plans for the adjoining development as set out in P25 S1091. There is no approved access to and from this proposed development to the public highway, making it effectively landlocked. The officer's report suggests that the 2 developers will need to ensure that the arrangements are consistent and legally approved, so acknowledging the physical relationship between the 2 development sites and the shared connecting access arrangements. We respectfully ask the committee whether it considers appropriate to approve this application when 2 physically connected developments do not presently have consistent approval and proposed access arrangements to the public highway. The officer's report confirms that the Chinner Neighbourhood Plan carries full weight. The relevant policies contained therein require consideration of matters including the character, form of development, residential amenity, parking, highways design and the relationship with the existing settlement. These should be weighed against the alleged benefits of the development, and more careful consideration is required than as reported, simply comparing its density with other developments. This is a substantial backland development which achieved planning in principle status despite having no access to the public highway. The committee is also asked to consider the combined effect of the 2 developments on traffic and access, pedestrian movement, drainage, the character of this part of Chinner and the relationship with existing residential properties and affordable housing. The Parish Council recognises that the Highway Authority has raised no objection despite there being no confirmed access to the public highway, but it is unclear whether the combined traffic and pedestrian impact of this development plus the adjoining development was taken into account. The Parish Council is concerned as to whether access, drainage and other matters can be controlled through conditions, all 29 of them, rather than in a detailed planning application. However, it is for the committee to decide whether the information before them is sufficient to conclude that these matters are acceptable now, particularly when the 2 developments are considered in their actual physical context, or whether the need for substantial conditions identifies the lack of planning detail. With regard to the planning balance, the Parish Council recognises the benefit of providing additional housing. However, we respectfully submit that those benefits must be balanced against the cumulative impacts and the detailed requirements of the development plan. Chinner Parish Council is not opposed to appropriate housing. The committee is asked to consider whether this particular proposal, physically connected to a further 10 dwellings, represents an appropriate form and scale of development, and whether it properly complies with the relevant planning permissions. For these reasons, Chinner Parish Council respectfully asks the committee to refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Councillors, anybody got any questions? Councillor Sadler.
Yes, Councillor Webb. I wonder if you can just clarify one small point, because there's the 10 houses which haven't been built yet that are due to be set behind 81 Lower Icknield Way, and Lower Icknield Way being the B4009. And then what you're describing is the 9 houses. I mean, I've seen the plan, so I know. I'm not suggesting I don't know the plan here, but the 9 houses behind that, obviously they're sharing that access. Can you just describe the difficulty of that access and the drainage issues? From the B4009, and the fact that that is actually quite a busy arterial route.
Right. These houses are not behind the number 481 development. They're adjoining it, so they're to the side, and there is no defined access from this application site through the application site of the number 81. It shows a turning head. It does not show access to this extended land. So it is the parish council's submission that there is no access on this application, nor on the one that's been agreed through to the public highway for this development.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go up, say. Any other questions, Councillor Hart?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Councillor Webb for speaking this evening and giving us such a comprehensive report, Chairman. Good to see one of the village parish councillors turn up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'm still not clear where these other 10 units are going. I have a plan that shows what appears to be an empty site to the north of the new access road. So in other words, if you went straight up, Councillor Webb, would that get you into the site you're talking about? Or is it land effectively to the west of the new access road and fronting onto Emerald Way? I'm just a bit confused as to where this other 10 unit site physically is and how it's going to be accessed.
That road there.
Right.
Could you point?
Yes. So you've got you
So
can see the B4009, and then you go along the red access road, which is where the development that has been approved for number 81. Those are the 10 houses, 9 and 1 bungalow.
Okay, so they wrap around the new access road.
Yes, where it shows wrapping around and a continuation, that is incorrect. At the end of the red section, and before it goes to the coloured greens with the new development on, is a turning head. There is no access along that, and there is no approved access. It's not in this application, and it wasn't in the one for number 81.
There's actually houses quite faint here.
Yes.
So these haven't been built yet, and that was always
none of it has been. None of it has been built, and it is all connected. And there is a further application to the north of the number 81 development. So there will be more houses presumably coming.
Will come in due course. That's right. Right, okay, so I now get it. So it's development in 3 phases essentially.
Didn't show it.
That will be a question that will be answered.
That's just a question of myself. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Ed. That's a lot clearer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we now go to the agent, and someone asked question, and I put it to the agent. Okay. Should be 5 minutes.
Chairman, members of the committee, good evening, and thank you for allowing me to address you, and good to see you all again. You do have a full and very comprehensive report before you from your officers recommending that permission be granted for the scheme, and I would commend that recommendation to you. I do, however, want to briefly comment on the proposal and to respond to some of the matters raised by the parish council, although without wishing to be disrespectful, I wasn't entirely certain what their objections were to the scheme, but perhaps no doubt you will ask me questions in that regard. As you'll be aware from the report, the principle of erecting 9 dwellings on this site has already been accepted through the terms of the permission in principle that was granted by the council last year. Notwithstanding such, the site is located within the Chiller development boundary as defined in the neighbourhood plan, where windfall development such as this is permissible, and it is a site that is surrounded by existing and approved residential developments. In this context, the layout and scale of the proposed scheme has been carefully designed so as to respect neighbouring residential amenity, with the layout and form also appropriately reflecting the character and density of surrounding residential developments. In addition, within the site, the interrelationship between the proposed dwellings has been sensitively considered to ensure high standards of amenity in terms of light, outlook and privacy, and provided for future occupiers with garden sizes that meet the requirements of your design guide. As detailed in the report, there are no technical constraints to the proposed development and no objections from any of your technical consultees. The site is located in flood zone 1 and suitable for the proposed development. Now, in regard to the ground conditions of drainage hierarchy, an appropriate drainage solution has been secured for the development. In addition, the Highway Authority have raised no objections in relation to the access and parking arrangements, with no ecological or biodiversity limitations to the scheme, and the principal arboricultural features both on the site and on the adjoining land are retained. Accordingly, and recognising that permission has already been granted for 9 dwellings on the site and the scheme is policy compliant, I would commend the recommendation to you. Thank you.
Councillor Norman.
We just try to deal with the matter of the access. In the officer's report, there is an appendix B with a hatched area. It's basically the same as is shown there. It's titled "Hatched Area Indicates Access Roadway as Approved under Application," and then it gives the reference for that application. Is it your understanding that the applicant of that application S0643, a different applicant, will have to apply for planning permission to grant an access onto your site?
So my client has served notice on the owner of that land because the owner of the Red Edge site area encompasses the access under that separate ownership. There is what I would regard to as a 1 to 1.5 metre strip of land within that ownership, which is at the end of an approved turning head that would need to be connected in order to facilitate this development. So by implication, that would require a Section 73 or Section 96 application to be submitted by that landowner to facilitate that development. Of course, if that landowner chooses not to, then this development can't take place. So it's continuing upon that, and I believe that's covered by one of the conditions recommended by your officers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Any further questions? Councillor Topping.
Just to say, so you're potentially ransom. You don't know that 1.5 metre strip, your client doesn't.
My client doesn't know.
No, and you don't have any rights of way as such over that land until it becomes adopted, or how are you going to deal with that?
Well, it'd be a separate private agreement between the two landowners, and as I say, landowner number 1 may choose not to enter that agreement.
So this is possibly not going to happen unless the landowners can come to a sense.
There has to be an agreement between the two.
Okay. Any further questions? See no further questions. So thank you, John. Just a comment on that. No, it's a planning issue.
No, it doesn't.
No, I think it's a planning issue. It's an issue between landowners and.
Chair, I think what the agent just said was that it was a planning issue because they have to apply for a section.
Yes, it's a planning application issue on the previous site, not on this site.
Yes, but that applicant will have to make fresh application.
Yeah, but it's not
relevant to this application.
Not relevant to this application of this one.
I understand.
Yeah, I think we've gotten that out. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Sadler, you're the ward councillor.
I'm not going to speak for councillor.
You're going to speak as a. That's fine, absolutely fine. We can go back then to Paul's questions on the planning officer. That's Sadler.
Well, I've got one question. The permission for principal for development was handled as a under delegated powers. Why?
Because that is because it's that's the how it's dealt with under the Constitution. Permission in principle at that time were dealt with
as under delegated powers and weren't automatically referred to committee. They'd have to be called in by the board members.
But we don't see it. You notice it?
Well, no, I mean, but the wording says minimum 8, maximum 9 houses, so it defines it as well, which is a nice sort of statement to know. It's it's basically a good decision that principal development's there. So why have we got that? Why have we got that lack of democracy in there?
But I think as a response to that, Councillor, you will have noticed, but you didn't, obviously wasn't flagged high enough.
Well, evidently so, yeah.
I've got one question, just to bottom out that highways thing. I think it's on page 61. The highway just say no objection, subject to title party. That's a very short first comment to make. Was that it?
They made comments about road. There was lots of detail that followed that about the road agreement side of it, but that's all to do with whether or not the road would be adopted. And it's again not something for us. It could be adopted, it may not be adopted, and it works accordingly. The main implication of adoption is whether or not it's for the waste management team, and they were happy with there's sufficient turning. So whether it's an adopted or it's a private agreement, the waste collection vehicle would be able to access the site. That's that really intention.
It just seems a very terse sort of comments, and we've had quite a lot of discussion on it. Councillor Topping.
Paul, are you satisfied that this isn't a cynical attempt to avoid having to have affordable housing? In other words, two schemes, adjoining sites, sharing the same access, and because they're in separate ownership, and I accept that, separate developers, that neither is having to provide affordable housing. And that particularly is the case because you don't have to own the land to put an application in across both bits. They chose not to. Is this a cynical ploy that we should be frowning upon?
I think that's not a question that we can ask the officer to answer. I see your point. I'm sure the answer is in this report.
Yes, it's in the report. Yes, we covered the matter of how we looked at the wording of the policy's wording because the separate sites, the two sites are in separate ownership and the separate developers. We haven't got a hook to turn to them and say, sorry, you manipulated this site, you've subdivided the site or amalgamated it in some way. So the policy is very, very clear that those are the factors that are required in order for us to do so.
And they've never been in the same ownership.
Not sort of reasonable within a reasonable time frame because they belong to the separate properties. One site was originally a long garden belonging to number 81 and the others were 87 and 89. It may be at some point for those properties were built, there was farm and in one ownership would go back a very long way.
Yeah, thanks.
That's all.
Could we make a condition on this that if one piece of land was sold to the other owner, we could then ask for an application to come back, and that would cover 19 houses rather than is it 19 or no something 19 right. So that would cover then 18 houses, which would then allow for affordable.
No, I don't think we can, and that's really the question. We sort of legal advice on this, and that was the way I framed it to legal, as in well, what if this situation changes? Can we impose some sort of clawback? So we have to put a condition on now, and the response I got from our legal advisor was no, because it would not be a reasonable, or be subject to challenge in imposing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, cool. So. What assessment has been undertaken of the cumulative planning impact of the two physically connected developments, rather than assessing 9 dwellings in isolation?
We do have regards to this. However, what we're bound by is the policies that allow for sites, windfall sites such as this and the one adjacent, to come forward. And there isn't really a policy hook for us to be able to say, well, there's a limit on how many windfall sites you can have.
So there isn't somebody saying, well, once you get to the two sites together are okay, but the third one, no, that's a no-no, without there being a specific impact-based issue that's identified. So if the Highway Authority had come back and said, no, we object to this, there's too intense, too much traffic, the junction's not safe, that's a reason we could resist it. There's some neighbour impacts associated with developing the two sites together, we resisted to that. And we could resist on character, all of those headings, but unfortunately none of those trigger from from having the two sites next to each other. There's nothing specific to trigger us to say.
I'm kind of getting an nail on the head there, because if you did a highways assessment based on the 9, and then you did another highway assessment based on highway assessment on the 10 that have already been approved, and then you did another highways assessment on the 9, but didn't consider the 10 that were already planned for, because they're not built yet. What's that cumulative impact? So the point is the highways assessment looking at 19 houses, or is the highways assessment considering 9?
Well, I can be fair.
Drainage is the same with all those aspects, isn't it?
Well, I can be fairly certain. I mean, the application is honest in the sense that you can see that the adjoining development on those plans is highlighted there with those properties on there. So the consultees would be fully aware, and they would have been consulted on that the developments next door. And so they will have been aware, the highways will be aware of the existence of the development adjacent. So they will know that but there's a combined movement. And they haven't raised an objection to it. So we can't even say with drainage, we've doubled the site, the impact of the site, and even it's gone back and forth a lot, but eventually the drainage engineer was happy with the current proposals that are included with it and the conditions that are looking proposed. So I'm afraid I do sympathise with the parish council with this. It is a question they raise every time we get another application in for in close proximity to each other, but there isn't a policy book for us to be able to say, okay, that's enough now. You've exceeded a limit. So there isn't any imposed limit either in the local plan or in the neighbourhood plan.
If I could just add to that, through you, Chair, I think very similar to the argument we had on the first case around whether something has the ability to come forward. The development next door hasn't yet been built out. Yes, it is an exam permission, but it may never be delivered. So in terms of that cumulative impact, I guess you could probably consider it to be some sort of loophole in planning, is that whole each case is assessed on its own merits. Does mean that actually you do need to look at this in isolation. It would not be fair or reasonable for us to make the applicant this particular site consider lots of other developments, even though they've got permissions. They may not actually come forward, and they may not come forward in the form in which they've got permission now. Now, if that scheme next door was being built out and was at some point where we thought that there's a meaningful prospect of it being fully delivered, we could then say, well, actually, we know it's coming forward. You need to take that into account. We're not in that position with this site.
Okay, Councillor.
Or could I will put this in the form of a question, but it's really for the record. Your appendix B gives the impression it says hatched area indicates access roadway as approved under application. And it very clearly shows the access joining to the site that's under consideration. And that, just for the record, that is not correct, is it? Which is your appendix B.
The green, the blue, actually.
It says as approved, access as approved under application, and it gives the impression that there is an approved access to this site, which in fact is not. It's not true. That's just for the record. But
I think what it's okay. I can see how that can constitute. I think what it means is that the development has a roadway that goes in those areas. What it doesn't show, because it's a site location plan, it doesn't show the exact detail that are on the detailed plans for the adjoining scheme, where you would get a turning head and it flows off. The turning head would go right up to the boundary. So the idea is that in terms of amendments that we would see, it would be a relatively small change to that scheme. We'd be having to rejig the entire scheme to be able to facilitate that access. We'd have to make a change to that.
It's a physical link, but it's not actually a legal link. There's no actual.
That's right.
Because it's included in the red line.
And I think that's why it's shown on the site location plan, that in order for this site to be considered as a deliverable site, it has to show access to and from it. And so that's why the applicant is shown in the red line.
It's not the red line, it's not the red line, that is the application site.
That is the red line of this site that you're considering this evening. It's not the red line of the site that's already got planning permission.
But it's the red line.
Well, it has to, for this site to be considered deliverable, its red line has to include access to and from it. So tonight you're considering the ability, this access to and from the main road into the site in this design.
I think we've got that out. I think, what Councillor Norman was saying, what we've been shown is actually quite misleading. It's not true. It's not.
This application has nothing to do.
The application is not helpful.
No, the adaptation, but also the red line is not part. The red line that shows the hatched area is not part of this application. In fact, it's merely indicative of the fact that there is a physical access.
The red line is part of the application, and that is why the applicants have to serve notice. They do not own that land.
The application site, an application site can involve land that is owned by the applicant, and it can involve land that's owned by somebody else, provided they've served notice, which they have done in this case, it can form part of the application. So the fact that there may be hurdles for them to get through in order to then actually build the development is quite a matter of planning terms.
So this application will give permission for that time.
No, give planning permission for the site as you see it, but it doesn't override other legal requirements such as.
Councillor Sally, another question for you.
So that access road that's attached doesn't exist, is that right? It doesn't exist currently.
Not on the ground, no, it's not there, but they have planning permission for it.
Yeah. Okay.
The next question is, if the land to the top left of that game, does that to get planning? Is that included? No, that's outside.
This is an application, it's a current application. Land to the north.
Just I'm allowed to answer questions on adjacent sites. There is a permissioning principle that's been granted, allowed its appeal on the land immediately to the north, and there's a further permissioning principle for a segment of land beyond that. So that site's effectively carved up into chunks.
Right, let's get back to this particular application, not think about any others. And we were just on this one. So, Councillor Sadler.
So in terms of the neighbourhood plan, given the officer's report confirms that the Chinner neighbourhood plan carries full weight, can the officer identify precisely how the detailed proposal complies with CHH1 and the other relevant neighbourhood plan policies, rather than relying principally on the fact that this site is within development boundary?
I think that's really covered by the report at the various stages of looking at each issue where there's relevant neighbourhood plan policies. We've considered them for each heading, and we consider that there isn't a conflict with those neighbourhood plan policies, and therefore that's why we're supporting the proposal, and we're not getting into a supply issue or having to raise paragraph 14. Yeah.
Okay, I think we've exhausted that one. I think it was essential. We've said they exhausted it. Right, so I'm looking for a motion. Councillor Howard.
Yeah, I propose officers' recommendation with the conditions that are made in the Chairman.
Thank you.
Would you like me to explain why?
Can I get a second there first? Yeah, no, Councillor Topping. Okay, yes, you can explain why.
Yeah, you know what we're up against here is quite simple. You know, but there is the planning commission in principle, and that's what we're fighting. We've asked all the right questions. Unfortunately, some of us don't like the answers that we're getting, and you know, I can quite understand that. But you know, the plan officer's gone through this in detail. Personally, yeah, there's a couple of items that I'm not happy with, but that they're not planning reasons, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would bring them to your attention. So, you know, I think the agent's come along again and said exactly what he said at the last time when he came and spoke to us. And I literally cannot see any reason why we could turn this application down. I agree. When you look at the access onto the main road, it doesn't look great, but the county council have supported it. So providing the applicant purchases a couple of pieces of land there, which to me, which will give them plenty of viewing either way, I just don't see how we can refuse this application, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Topping, do you have now or?
No, I'll pass.
They pass. So it's open for debate. Is there any debate? Anybody wants to speak on it? Councillor Studley.
Yeah, well, obviously, I've kind of indicated that I'm not exactly pro, and I think there's a few things about well, clearly access is an issue to the site. Its relationship with the neighbouring developments is an issue. There's some drainage issues. There's 28 conditions. There's density, and really, as a material consideration, the neighbourhood plan, and specifically about roads and schools and so forth. We bring it up every time with Chinner. It's a fairly big settlement. It was a village once, but of course now it's kind of, well, it's big enough to kind of absorb more houses. And I think, this is the trouble. There's this constant urbanisation of Chinner on the basis that it is already quite large. So now it's a kind of small town. So actually it can take a few more houses, there'll be a big town and so forth. So I'm not quite sure why that's okay. I mean, in the 3 or so years it would be sitting here on planning, I'm not clear on that, why that's the case. It doesn't sit on there. It doesn't sit on the plan. It doesn't sit with, it doesn't sit within our strategy, our spatial plan or anything. And the B4009, I don't think committee members quite believe me, because I think the B4009, especially low way, which particularly is bad, that's the spine route that goes through from Princess Risborough to the M40 motor road. And I'm telling you, that is a country lane that has just gradually got slightly bigger. So really, and what you've got is lorries tumbling up and down there, cars and so forth. It's becoming a busy commuter route. There's something like 25,000 houses planned for Princess Risborough, and we're not dealing with that. And the thing is, I feel that Chinner should be supported a little bit better if it's expected just to take this drip feed of 9 houses here, 9 houses there, and so forth. There's nothing really there to there's nothing. Why should we accept this development? It's just yet another development. Okay, it's only 9, but it's 9 on top of the 10 that's already been approved, on top of the 5 down the road that were approved last month, and so forth. What it equals is a lot of housing, a lot of extra burden on the area. The B4009 is not dealt with, and there's nobody out there going to find the 15 odd million to go and put a bypass around Chinner. So really, I don't think you would have the objection in Chinner to small scale developments like that if it came with the infrastructure, and that's really what's missing.
Yep, thank you. I also disagree with you, Ed. Totally agree with you. Yep. Thank you, Chair. But we have to work with policy consortium.
Sorry, one other thing. Could I propose a site visit for this? Because I think before that is an issue. Too late?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a proposal for a recommendation, which was proposed and seconded, and we're in debate for that. So I think it's not way. Yeah. Is there any other debates? Anybody else wish to speak on the debate? If not, we'll go back to Councillor Topping.
Yeah,
so second one.
I share a lot of what Ed said. I think it's disappointing when you get applications like this 8 or 9 at a go, that cumulatively are quite significant numbers of units, which could have an effect on highways. But regretfully, this is the way it's come in. This is what we've got in front of us. It has permission in principle already. The development, I think, has been done as sensitively as possible in relation to the surrounding units. And I think the outcome is as good as we're likely to get. And therefore I would call on members of the committee to support this. I do share Ed's frustration of the way that villages like Chinner are having units thrust upon them in drifts, and each development of itself does not actually add to the infrastructure total, and not even an affordable unit on either this scheme or on the 10-unit scheme, and that is frustrating. But it's what we've got in front of us. This is what we're considering, and I believe that this is not a bad outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Tucker. I go to Councillor Arlott to Civil.
Yeah, just in summary, and I agree with all the other speakers. You know, I understand where Sam is coming from, but as my neighbour said here, you know, did couples once a village, and look at it now. You know, come to Henley and you won't find any green spaces there now. You know, so much back development, infill has taken place there over the last 10 years. I think the officer, to be fair, he's got 28 conditions there, which obviously says, you know, it could well be a problem site. So he's obviously covered these with 28 conditions. And I would ask again to make sure that all these conditions do take place before any building starts on the site there. So, look, I've heard the debate. The county council highways support the access onto the main road. I would imagine that's 20 miles per hour down there. It should be 20 miles per hour like all the other roads inside Oxfordshire now. So in theory, people shouldn't be speeding down there. And if any plans come in the future, maybe they'll sit around about there, I don't know. But that's for the future. So I commend the decision. The recommendation of the officer to the council's chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Arlott. So we have a proposal for officer's recommendation for approval. All those in favour, please show. 6. All those against? 2 against. That is carried. Thank you, committee. I'm getting that dark. I thought it was dark. Sorry, the appeal at the end of the. Look at the appeal. Oh.
Patrons and three chairman.
Well, thank you, Councillor. I could propose to accept the yeah, just to look at it. Any comments on them? We've been winning someone, losing someone.
That's a question another day.
Any questions on appeals? No. Well, we don't mind that. That's chair as well. And the real 6981. But we are out there showing that. But you get it moved into the national landscape and not changed it. Yeah. That's the issue. We're not agreed though, so you're not national landscape. Can we where else?
Yeah. Or maybe the national landscape there would have to be made.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll put our friends there. Thank you, Commissioner.
Larry, can you stop the forecast, please?
Ed.